my name is Brandon Fuller with Raise the Roots. Thank you for joining us. Today we're going to talk about the top 9 things everybody should be doing in engaging networks in 2019. This is part 1. We're going to cover the first 5 topics in this video, and then we'll cover the last 4 topics in the next video. So let's go ahead and get started with creating export groups. Export groups allow you to select constituent fields that are visible in exports. So if you're creating exports out of engaging networks and you feel like there are so many columns in your spreadsheet, you can use export groups to limit the number of columns that are in your spreadsheet. It also allows you to run and download exports faster because there's less data in your export, and so it's going to happen much faster and take up less space in your computer. So to start, you want to go up to the hello and then your first name in engaging networks and select the account settings option. From there, you're going to land in the account data structure part of account settings, and you'll see that there's a button for selecting the export groups. So click the export groups button. And here you're going to have an add group. When you create a group, you'll be able to select the constituent fields that you want visible in your export. So you can pick as many or as few fields as you want and name the group that you've created. Then click Save. When you're ready to use this new group, you're going to go to the Export tool under the Data and Reports tab and select your new query, put in the filters that you want to create your export, and when you click on Use Query, you'll be taken to this familiar Export Options menu. And here, as usual, you can select your format, the file type, your reference names, but now you'll see that there's a Use Export Group, and now you know what that's for. It's to choose the export group that you've just created so that your export has only those constituent fields that you want available in the spreadsheet. So select your export group and export. So now your export will contain just those transaction fields, but specifically the constituent fields that you've selected for your export group. So let's go into the system and see how this works. So here's Engaging Networks, and I go up to the Hello Your Name here and click on Account Settings. We're going to land in the Account Data Structure area here, and here's that Export Groups button. I'll click on that and click Add Group. I'm going to name my group, so I'm just going to call it first and last name, and I'll choose those constituent fields here. It's likely your export group listing here will have a lot more constituent fields. Most Engaging Networks users do. You might have some fields that are dedicated to your database of record, to peer-to-peer fundraising, to something that you created years ago. And unfortunately, when you create an export without an export group, all of those fields will end up in your spreadsheet. So now this will allow you to choose just the fields you want to see. I'll click Save. And now I have my export group. I'll quickly warn you that you may have to log out of Engaging Networks and log back in to clear the cache to see your new export group in the export tools. I'm just going to go ahead and go to Data and Reports and click Export. I'll click on New Query, and for simplicity's sake, I'll just click on the All Users filter option. I'll click Use Query, and here you'll see Use Export Group as an option. And this is where you should see the export group that you created. Like I said, you may have to log out and log back in to view it. Just click Next and go ahead and export your data. And in this new spreadsheet that comes out with your export, you're going to see just those constituent fields that you selected for your export group. So that's export groups. Next, we're going to talk about creating an unsubscribe page. So currently in your email, you may have an unsubscribe button that allows people to remove themselves from your opt-in. The problem with that is that they may not want to remove themselves from your list entirely, but maybe just from a subset of your lists, or maybe they just want to receive fewer emails. An unsubscribe page gives your supporters more control over the emails that they're receiving, and it allows you to offer different opt-ins and different subscription options to your supporters. You choose which opt-out supporters see. They'll see their current opt-ins. Their current opt-ins will be indicated with a checkbox that has a check in it. and they can unsubscribe from a single opt-in, from multiple opt-ins, or from a global opt-in if you offer that option. So step one for creating a new unsubscribe page is to go into Page Builder and click the Create New Page button. You'll have your usual options of different page types that are available, and you want to choose the Email Subscriptions button. You'll create a new page, and you'll want to drop a content block onto the page to give people some context about what this page is, but then you want to drop on a form, and that form should include all of your opt-ins that you want people to have access to. So you could have a general opt-in, you could have an opt-in for fundraising, advocacy, newsletter subscriptions. You could have an opt-in available for people who want to receive fewer emails. You also need to include email address field on that form, just like all Page Builder pages require. Then you'll create a second page thanking them for updating their subscriptions. Save that and turn it from new to live. Once your page is live, if you want to link to it from your emails, you'll go into your email template and highlight, or your email that you're creating, and highlight a Manage Subscriptions text area. Then in the WYSIWYG blue bar, you'll choose the icon of an envelope with an X over it. A new pop-up will appear, and you'll be able to select your new unsubscribe page from the drop-down menu. You'll know you've created it correctly because it'll show just the landing page name and none of the opt-ins will be visible there. Now your supporters will click that Manage Subscriptions button and they'll be able to manage the subscriptions they receive rather than opting out of all of your emails. So let's go into EN and see how this is done. So I'm going to go to Pages, Manage Pages, and click on New Page. Here is the Email Subscriptions option. Click Next. I'll name my page like I said, here you can drag a content block onto the page, say, to explain to people what they're seeing and how it works. And then you want to drag a form block onto the page. You can go to the Opt-ins tab. You can manage your opt-ins to create new ones, and all of your existing opt-ins will be available here. You drag them onto the page, and also make sure that you include email address. You'll click Save. Then go to page 2, enter some page content there to thank people for updating their subscriptions, and make sure that you turn your page to live. Then when you're ready to either update an email or your email template, you go into the email, highlight the text that you want to link to your Manage Subscriptions page, click the little envelope with an X over it, choose your Manage Subscriptions page, and now when people click that link, EN will recognize them and it will show them on that page what they're currently opted into, and then allow them to opt in or opt out of some of your other opt-ins so that they can manage the subscriptions. So that's how you create a Manage Subscriptions page in Engaging Networks. Next, we're going to talk about using tracking parameters. Tracking parameters are a little append that gets added to the URL for your Engaging Networks pages, and they allow you to measure actions and donations by source. You can create these for Facebook, Twitter, coalition partners. You can create them for separate ads that you're running online. You can segment supporters based on tracking parameter. So once the supporters come onto your page from your tracking link and they've made a donation, you can now segment people who came from that source, like Facebook supporters or Twitter supporters. You can also report on how a tracking parameter is performing. So if you wanted to see a visual report of how much money has come in from a coalition partner tracking parameter you've created, you can do that as well. So to create a tracking parameter, the first thing you want to do is click on the name of your page. It'll pop down and you'll see there's a Manage Tracking button there. Click on that, and if you click on the New button, EN will allow you to create a new tracking parameter. The first thing you're going to do is create a reference name. Here I've named it coalition partner, and you also need to select a parameter value. The parameter value is the value that will actually be added to the end of your URL. And what's important about this is that when you export transaction data, it's going to show the tracking parameter as a column in your export, and the value that you'll see is this parameter value. So if you click on the random button that EN provides, it's just going to provide you with a value of letters and numbers that are randomly selected. In your export, those are going to mean nothing to you. You're not going to know the difference between somebody who came from Facebook or somebody who came from a coalition partner. So you want to name it something that makes sense to you, but maybe not something that if the public saw it at the end of the URL, may confuse them or make them uncomfortable. So here for coalition partner, I've put CP, so that when I see that in my export, I'll know that's for coalition partner. Next, you want to click create, and you'll see your new tracking parameter in the list of available tracking parameters. Choose it, then click the generate tracking URL button, and EN will create a tracking URL for that page with your tracking parameter at the end of it. Just copy that and hit save. Now you can use that tracking parameter to track donations from your website, donations from your newsletter, donations from social media. In this example, we're going to insert a tracking parameter link into an email. So if you want to track the number of donations or advocacy actions that come from your newsletter, this is how you would do it. You'll highlight the text that you want to link to your page. Then you'll select the little chain link icon from the blue WYSIWYG editor bar. That's the insert campaign link button. And you'll choose the campaign that you're linking. So in this case, it's the donation page. And you'll see that because I've assigned to the donation page this particular tracking parameter, a list of those tracking parameters assigned to that page are available, and I'll choose coalition partner. So now if somebody clicks on that link and makes a donation from this email, we'll know that they came from the coalition partner link or the newsletter link. You can export and segment supporters based on which tracking parameter they took action from. So if you're in the export tool, you'll see that one of the tabs available is that little pin. And if you select that and pick your tracking parameter, you can now export data, segment supporters, whatever you want to do based on that tracking parameter, people who took actions from that tracking parameter. In visual reports, you can do a donations overview report, and you'll see that one of the options is to view campaign fundraising data based on that tracking parameter. So you can see the fundraising data for people who came from a Facebook tracking parameter, for instance. So tracking parameters are great for tracking gifts, actions, recruitment from social, ads, your website, coalition partners, etc. Let's see how they work in engaging networks. So here I have my pages, and I'm going to click on this donation page version B. And right now I have a coalition partner tracking parameter assigned to this. I'm going to click Manage Tracking and New. I'm going to call this Google Ads. That's my reference name. The parameter value that's going to be added to the end of my link, I'm going to just call GA. Like I said, if you click on random, this is the value you get. It's not particularly informative, and so it won't be useful to you when it shows up in your data exports. Okay, so if I click on my Google Ads, click Generate Tracking URL, you'll see here's the URL. I can highlight it and copy it and use it in my Google Ads. Now it's associated with this particular page. Anytime you want to see a quick view of how many people have donated on this page from that tracking parameter, you can click on View Quick Reports, and that data will be available here. Like I said, you can also go to Data Reports, and you can use tracking parameters in queries. So whether you're setting up an email audience or you're exporting data, you're going to click on the Tracking Parameter tab, and you can just add your tracking parameter. It's also available in visual reports. So if I'm creating a fundraising donations overview visual report, and I want to see all the donations made in the month of December, from people arriving and taking an action from this particular tracking parameter, I can just click on it, hit select, and visual reports will show that data. So that's tracking parameters. Now we're going to go over creating profiles. Profiles and conditional content actually work hand in hand. So we're going to start with profiles, and then we'll talk about how to use them in conditional content. Profiles use filters to identify supporters. It's kind of like creating a query in engaging networks where you have certain filters that are available, but the filters are different in profiles. You assign conditional content emails and page blocks based on profiles. So if you're creating a conditional content email where one version goes to one profile, one version goes to another profile, you're going to assign profiles to each email version. You can also assign profiles to different versions of page blocks like form blocks and content blocks. You can combine the query tool with profiles, so you can use the profile filters to build a profile and then bring that profile into the query tool and use the query tool to add on to the filters available in profiles. You can also report on the performance of specific profiles. So if you're thinking, what kind of profile would I create? A profile is handy for an audience that you want to use and report on and assign conditional content to on a regular basis. So this might be major donors, mid-level donors, super advocates, people who live in particular states that you frequently target. So these are people who create an audience that you want to target on a regular basis. So to create a profile, you're going to start by going to the Data and Reports tab in Engaging Networks and clicking on Profiles. You'll select the New Profile button. Then you have to decide what filter condition you want between your filters in that profile. So between filters, you can choose to have an and or an or value. So if you're looking for supporters who live in Michigan, Wisconsin, Ohio, or Wisconsin, you could have an or value between each of those filters. If you're looking for supporters who have donated $500 in the last 365 days, and have taken 2 advocacy actions, you'd have to have and values between those filters. And Engaging Networks requires you to make that choice in the profile. You should familiarize yourself with the filters that are available in profiles. They have fundraising filters, advocacy filters, filters based on constituent data, question responses. So it's helpful information. It even dives down into recurring donation data. So you can build a profile of recurring donors whose recurring gift has become suspended, for instance. You'll select a filter and you can set up all the conditions for that filter. So in this example, we're looking for fundraising donation amount between $100 and $500 in the last 365 days. If you want to create a range like this, you put a tilde between the 2 values, and Engaging Networks will look between value A and value B. You'll click the Save and Close button, and then you have to decide if you want to run this profile manually every time you're sending an email, conditional content email, or you're sending people to a conditional content page. To manually run it, you'll click the all black circle. If you want EN to run it automatically every 24 hours, you can select that blue and black button, and it will do that automatically. Profiles are available in the query tool. So one of the tabs in the query tool is these people sort of standing around in a circle. That's where you'll find your profiles if you want to build an email audience off your profile or export data based on your profile. They're also available in the visual reports tool. So if you are creating a donations overview visual report and you want to see how much money was raised during a certain period of time from major donors or super advocates, you could choose your profile in the donations overview visual report. Profiles are great for your most frequent audience segments and reporting segments that really simplify your work. So let's go ahead and see how these work in Engaging Networks. I'm going to go up to Data and Reports and select Profiles. I'm going to create a new profile of super activists who have made a donation in the last year. I'm going to name it. And I'm going to use an and filter condition here because I want to know people who are super advocates and have made a donation. So my first filter is going to be advocacy activity. I'm going to click add filter, and I'm looking for supporters whose activity count is greater than 2 on any advocacy activity during the last 365 days. Next, I'm going to look at fundraising, and I'm going to look at fundraising total donations. So I'm looking for supporters whose total donations are between $1 and $100,000 in USD during the last 365 days. So now I'm going to find donors who've made a gift of any kind and who have had more than 2 advocacy actions in the last 365 days. I'll click Save and Close, and now I can see my super advocates. This is where I can manually run this profile, or I can set it so that Engaging Networks will automatically run it every 24 hours. Like I said, if you go to the export tool, you can create a query, and this would be true for creating an email audience or an export audience. And here's the tab where I can grab my profiles. I can also go to Visual Reports, click on Fundraising, look at Donations Overview, and I can look at an overview based on my profile. So how are people in this profile performing when it comes to fundraising in the month of December? So that's creating profiles. Next, we'll talk about conditional content where you're actually going to use these profiles. So conditional content allows you to customize email content by audience. It also allows you to customize page content and forms by audience. So let's start with email. In the email tool, you're going to select the New Campaign button. And you'll see that you have 2 options here when it comes to conditional content. You have conditional content and split test conditional. Conditional content allows you to create multiple versions of an email and assign each version to a different profile. Split test conditional is the same thing, but you'll actually create different versions of each of those emails so that you can test things like subject line, email content, images, etc. In the email setup area, you'll select the profile that you're assigning to each version of the email that you're creating. So here's email A, and you'll see that there's a drop-down for profile where I can choose major donors as the profile assigned to this email. People in that profile will receive this version. Once you've created all the different versions of your email and you've assigned them to the appropriate profile, you can create a version of your email that basically goes to everybody else. So if in your email audience there are people who don't happen to fall into any of these profiles, they can get this version, and EN calls it the fallback version. So you'll create the version and you'll assign it to fallback under the profiles dropdown. You do have to rank your emails or your profiles and tell Engaging Networks which profile applies if somebody is actually in 2 profiles. So it's possible that you have used multiple profiles in your conditional content email campaign and somebody happens to be in 2 of these profiles at the same time. And so EN's going to need to know which email they should receive. And so you're just going to rank one email profile over another, and that way it'll know which one to prioritize. Next, we're going to talk about pages. So when you're creating your pages in EN and you want people in profiles to see different versions of that page or different versions of content on that page, the first thing you have to do is tell the page what profiles it should be using. So we're going to go into our page, we're going to edit it. We're going to go over to the right-hand toolbar, and you'll see that there's a conditional content option in the menu. And we're going to click on Profiles. You'll see all the profiles that are available in your account, and you'll choose the ones that you want selected for this particular page. You can refresh the profile right there if you want, and then click Save. Now if you go into either a content block or a form block and edit it, or if you drop a new form block or content block onto the page, that in the upper right-hand corner of the editing area for that content block or that form block, that there is an All Supporters drop-down, and that allows you to pick which profile this edited version of that form block or that content block is going to apply to the profile. So let's say we're creating a form and we want people in the major donors profile to see a higher ask string. I'll go up to that drop down in my form block and I'll choose major donors. Now any changes I make to this form block are going to apply to the major donors profile. When I send an email to my major donors, they click the link to my donation page, they're going to see the ask string that I set up on this form. So you'll save that once you've made your changes to the ask string, save it, save the page, and then you can preview what this page will look like to people in that profile. So if I go up to the little magnifying glass for my page, I'll be able to choose what profile. So I can choose the major donor profile and then click preview in browser. And I'll see what people in the major donor profile see when they land on the page. So one thing to remember with profiles and conditional content is that you always want to refresh your profile before sending either a conditional content email or sending supporters to a conditional content page. So let's see how this works in Engaging Networks. So here I'm creating a new email campaign. I'm going to name it as always. Then I'm going to choose conditional content. And so here, this is version A. For my subject line, I can just choose an email. And I can assign a profile to this version. So I'm going to call this the major donors version. I'll save. I'll choose a sender, of course. And now you'll see I'll be able to add another email. So I can do this whole process all over again. I can name my email, put a subject in, choose the sender, and then select a profile. This time I'm just going to choose that fallback option. Basically, anybody who's in my email audience who doesn't fall into that major donors profile is going to get this fallback version of my email. So there we go. We're good to go. When I go to send options, you'll see here that it's asking me to rank my profiles, which version, if somebody falls into two audiences, should they receive. That doesn't really apply here because I'm just using one profile. But if you're using more than one profile, you'll want to tell EN that if somebody falls into two profiles, go ahead and send them the major donors version. You can, of course, preview your email, send tests of it, and then you set up your audience. And your audience can actually be bigger than the people who are just in your profile. And basically, the people in the profile will get the profile version, and the people who are not will receive that fallback version. And you just send it. Next, we'll look at conditional content in pages. So I'm going to go to this donation page. I'm going to edit it. And I'm going to go over here and click on conditional content. Select profiles. I'm going to add a profile to this page. I'll choose major donors and save. Now, when I drop a form onto the page, there's going to be the version that all supporters will see, but I can also create a version that's just for major donors. And the difference it's going to be for major donors is that I'll have a different ask string. So I would just drag my donation amount field onto this page. I'd set the donation amounts for my major donors. I could also set the donation amounts for all supporters. I'd click save. And if I want to preview what this will look like for major donors, I click the magnifying glass, select major donors, and then click preview in browser. So that's conditional content. So that's everything in part 1 of 9 things everybody should be doing in Engaging Networks in 2019. In part 2, we'll talk about A/B test pages, creating a welcome series, using the component library, and creating custom autoresponders. Thanks so much for listening to part 1 of this video.